Cultural Madness. We got our host here, Jay from Melbourne. Our man Bedz right here. Yours truly, Alfie, is here with you. Today we're going to be talking about what? The Americanization of Black Australian youth. Yeah. Right. So Jay, you and I were having this discussion off where, and we were talking about the problematic nature of all of this. My thought process of all of this is pretty much the hyper visibility of African American culture and how it's just pervasive all over the place. And because Australia is such a young place, particularly for African people to come to, it becomes we start lagging behind. Yep. So I don't particularly think there's anything wrong with adopting African American culture, but
you don't think there's anything wrong?
There's nothing wrong just for the time being, but there's obviously a loss of self in there a little bit, because we're still finding ourselves. We're still trying to find ourselves in the subculture of Australia, right? Yeah. But you were saying is that we're losing our African culture in that. What are your thoughts? Go ahead, talk to me.
So here's the thing, yeah? I know you to be somebody who's switched on, who's intellectual, and you've got your sights on major things, right? So for you, using the hip hop lingo and engaging in all of that, it's all as a way of connecting with your brethren, right? Now, it's one thing to pick up on the lingo and aspects of African American culture for fun, for giggles, for shit and all that. But it's another thing to adopt it as a complete identity. And that's what's happening with a lot of the youngsters, especially out here in Melbourne. You know, a lot of the youngsters that I know that don't have the knowledge that you have, that aren't as worldly as you are, that don't have the connection to their African roots, are completely getting lost in it. Tell me why. Tell me why somebody who has never set foot in America is speaking with the thickest American accent throughout the entire conversation. You know, tell me why somebody who lives in some nice neighborhoods in Melbourne is speaking about the trenches and OTF and things that are outside of our experience. So that's what I have an issue with, you know, just adopting it completely as an identity. Because for me, you'll find me with my homeboys talking about, hey, yo, my G, hey, yo, this, hey, yo, that, you know, but it's all, as I said earlier on, it's all for fun, and it's all as a way of connecting with this idea, this more broader idea of being Black. And to be fair, Australia or African Australians aren't the only group of people who are adopting this African American image or engaging in that culture, because it happened in the UK. It even happens with some white kids that I know here. But again, as I said, the issue is we're just adopting it as our sole identity. But my man Bedz, you want to chime in there?
Yes.
I'm keen to hear what you think.
I can kind of see. I can see how we're kind of getting influenced, especially the young African Australians, because when you think of identity, right? Like who can they really look up to that can influence that looks like them in a way? Like, you know, us, we get influenced by people that look like us.
Amen.
You know, and who are the only people of color that you see on TV? Mainly African Americans.
Period. Yeah.
Most of the world, you can be in England, you can be in anywhere in Europe, right? Here in Australia also, when we look at the TV, the most Black people that we see on TV are from America. So we identify with that. Right. So when the young people watch all this, watch hip hop and movies and all this American culture, they're identifying with it and it's influencing them. So I can see the good and the bad. The good thing is you can get some good things from it. Like I'm not talking about the gang stuff, but the representation, to be able to see someone looks like you TV being represented. But the only issue is we hardly have any good examples to kind of get any influences from. So these kids, they go into gang culture. You can be someone here in Australia that has never influenced the same hardship that people are going through in America. I've actually been to America, and it's much different than here. Like in Australia, you got everything. You know what I mean? Like the government takes care of people and whatever. Like I'm not saying that people aren't going through hard stuff, but it's a much easier lifestyle in America. You don't have to worry about gang wars and whatever, about guns and stuff, about trenches.
The trenches.
But this is the stuff that the kids are worried about because they're influenced heavily with it.
Well, yeah, it's like I said, it's the dominant culture, man.
It's dominant.
It's the dominant culture, and if that's where you see yourself, and that's who you see yourself in, you're going to naturally want to emulate it. You want to copy that. Whether that's why every black person, that's why there's people wonder why so many black people are in the arts, and why aren't there enough black people in the sciences? Because you don't see that. It's true. They don't show you.
So it doesn't inspire you to do. It doesn't inspire you to do that.
Yeah. You got. If you can't see it, how you gonna want to even desire to be that? You got to see yourself in something first. So I don't really think you can blame the youth for adopting that culture. It's the same reason you see all black athletes, and that creates another pretty much wave of other black youth who want to be soccer players, who want to be athletes and all sorts of things and that. Not because they're not oftentimes because they're way more talented, which I think they are, but it's just that you see other people and it's like, I can do that too. It is what it is, man.
I need to add one more thing is before I let you go in, John.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget that, this is not a lot of the things that we see on TV is not actually American culture, but that's what's represented by the media and Hollywood and stuff like that. So it's like there's a lot of African Americans doing a lot of productive things, right? And doing in America doing amazing things, but you don't see that. Mainly, that's not what's influencing the youth. What's influencing the youth is normally what's promoted on the music videos and stuff. So it's normally like women, drugs, gang violence, and that's why the kids are violent. Like the kids, we're not naturally violent, but everybody wants to belong somewhere. Everybody wants, especially when you're young, you want to be cool. You want to impress others. You want something you can really identify with and call your own. So it's like, yeah, we think that's American culture, but in reality, it's probably like the worst part of the American culture, I can say. It's just like Africa. When people think of Africa or so, like what does TV promote? Just World Vision, kids starving and whatever. And people all around the world, when they think of Africa, they think of a place that's poor. The whole continent is just poor. People are starving. There's no food and whatever, but that's not possible. How can you sustain a whole continent and everyone there is starving? But that's just a misconception. So the youth is very attractive to the youth. Like they see that these people are getting money doing these things. So they're thinking to themselves, if I do this, I can also make money. Because no one likes to suffer in this world. You know what I mean? Everybody wants an easy lifestyle, especially when you think about 9 to 5, working hard, getting what you want. But you see these kids in the music videos, they're doing all these crazy things and they're making money. That's what's being promoted.
Yeah. Can I ask one thing? I'll toss it to you one moment. Are these Australian African youth losing their identity whilst trying to immerse themselves in this foreign Afro-American culture?
No. And that's exactly my point. And I was about to say something about that. So my issue isn't so much that these kids want to be musicians and they want to be entertainers. That's not the issue. And Alfred, you touched on a very important point that you naturally as a person would gravitate towards where your people are and where your people have succeeded. So the issue isn't music per se. The issue is, and let's look at it within the context of Australian music, right? My frustration is this: a lot of the Australian rappers and a lot of the Australian musicians aren't talking about things that pertain to the African Australian experience. That's one. And number two, they're using lingo or jargon, language that people in Chicago are using or people in New York are using. And with that, when you continue imitating for a very long time, you don't develop your own sense of identity. You don't produce good music, because essentially what you become is a watered down version of America or whichever country that you're imitating, right? Let's look at the case of UK, for instance. For a very long time, a lot of UK rappers and R&B singers were looking up to America, using their lingo, using their form of music, word for word, structure for structure.
They were even changing their accents.
Yeah. And even growing up, one of my favorite musicians was this young lady, she's not young anymore, but her name was Jamila, and she had this song. I think you guys have heard it. It goes something like this: I don't know who you are. And excuse my disgusting singing voice, but I don't know who you are, but you must be some. I know
that song.
I didn't know she was from the UK. No accent, nothing. And so for a very long time, a lot of people, including myself, we weren't taking the UK music or entertainment scene very seriously. But recently, something magical happened. Their whole music industry transformed for one fundamental reason. They said, you know what? We're going to be proud of where we live. And B, we're going to use our lingo, and we're not going to hide our accents. Right? And now what's happening is, bam, they're blowing up. The likes of Stormzy are blowing up. The likes of Skepta are blowing up. Not only that, but the world is beginning to respect and appreciate their sound, and they want to be a part of that culture. You've got UK words creeping into West Melbourne. Mandem, this and that. You know what I mean? And now what's beginning to happen is they are powerful musicians and powerful entertainers, influential entertainers in their own right. Why? Because of a fundamental reason. They've stopped saying, you know what, we're not going to imitate America. It was cool for a while until we can find our own feet and our own sound. But this is who we are now. And this is exactly where my frustration lies. We're not seeing that happening in Australia. And the hip hop, we're not seeing that happening in Australia. Do you know why? Because that wake up call hasn't happened.
Because it's still underdeveloped. It's still an underdeveloped subculture. It will take time. It will take time. But until enough people have that realization, let's be authentic to who we are. The roots aren't deep enough yet, bro.
You don't think so?
The roots aren't deep enough yet. You don't have a big enough music scene, a big enough creative scene. They haven't found themselves.
Okay, but it makes it more difficult to find yourself if you're prolonging this phase of trying to find your own feet by imitating aspects of someone else's musical culture. Do you know what I mean? So that's where my frustration lies. It's taking longer with Australia because they're taking longer to wake up.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, within, in terms of music, that's where my frustration lies. In terms of the overall, what would you say? The overall societal experience and the interpersonal relations that we have, this is where my frustration lies. A lot of the people that I engage with here in Melbourne, it's almost like they're proud to be Black, but they're not so proud to be African. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's another layer. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating, man, because nothing is beginning to pick up. And it's not beginning to pick up because we're still asleep. It's like, wake up.
There's this thing that everybody it's happened with the entire Afro culture, whether you're African American, Black British, African Australian, or you just continental African.
Yeah,
there's inner conflict between every single one of us, where it's a pull of power. Who's more? Everybody's jealous of African Americans because of their hyper visibility, and then African Americans are jealous of continental Africans because of they actually know where they're from, and then it's just everybody trying to compete with each other. Who's better? Everybody. That. It's a messed up dynamic, bro. It's messed up. And that frustrates me. But I'll toss it to you, Bedz.
Yeah, that's interesting. Especially, like with the youth, I don't see them really embracing the culture that we have here in Australia. Like, I know Alfie said it was fresh, right? It's still fresh. And I can agree with that too, because like what I see with England, like you said, Jay, how England just embraced their culture. They embraced because they have a big Jamaican and the Caribbean community and also West African community. And they kind of just, they embrace that because it's even in their slang. Certain words that man them and stuff, that's Jamaican. That's Jamaican, And they say like how the West Africans, they always how they always say I can't say it, I don't want to cuss, but it's like they use a lot of slang from both those cultures and they just incorporated it to their own. The issue with us is Australia has a lot of things to kind of be proud of and to embrace, but they don't see that it's something to embrace, because like America is kind of taking all the spotlight in a way. And UK, we're getting influenced by the UK also.
You know what another problem is with that? There aren't enough first generation African Americans to have that, to demand that of them. You don't have enough first and second generations here. African.
That's true.
Australians, sorry, Australia. Yeah, African Australians. If everybody's arriving straight from Sudan, straight from war, or straight from Nigeria, what do you expect of them, bro? The only thing they don't see many black people here in Australia. So what are they going to do? First thing they're going to look at African Americans.
You can say with your own experience too. I don't know if you guys have similar experiences, but growing up in this country, like who could you really see yourself in? Because even Australia doesn't really embrace the culture that it has. Even in the media, that's something that's even deeper. Like,
you reckon?
Yeah, everywhere. Like, only now we're starting to kind of embrace what we have here in Australia. Australia is one of the most multicultural countries in the world.
Yeah,
one of the most. But you don't really see that. Now you're starting to see the diversity.
You don't see it displayed in the media. Yeah?
You don't see it displayed in the media.
Right? You know what?
I think, but recently it's happening with
but in a negative way. Diversity in a negative way. This is like
what is negative?
I don't know. I know what he's saying. Yeah, I know what he's saying. But one of the things that's real, man, is these neighbors and home and away, especially. They keep maintaining this ridiculous romanticism of what Australia is. All these
beaches,
beaches. Oh, bro, you don't see no black person there. You don't see no craziness. So it's stuff like that. But I get what you're saying. Like when they do display some form of multiculturalism, it's to create some kind of moral panic that the black people are doing this. This is going on in Melbourne. They're messing up here and there. I'm tossed.
But I think, and like I share your view when it comes to neighbors and home and away. But I don't think we're going to really start seeing ourselves as African Australians represented on TV, on that mainstream media, on mainstream media platforms until we begin to have some black writers. some black directors, because that's what happened in the UK. From what I've noticed, a lot of the black content that they have on TV is it comes from the fact that a lot of the creative directors, a lot of the people who are sitting in these meetings that these TV networks are having, a lot of the people that are writing tend to be black or from Jamaica or the Caribbean. But that's not happening in us. That's not happening in us. So I think we need to push and do for ourselves, and then we will begin to get included in the mainstream media as well.
Agree.
Yeah?
Great own table. I agree with that. Great own table. Yeah. But how in that, I guess, so we'll swing back around to the finding a sense of identity in as African Australian youth.
Yeah.
How does that begin? Aside from the obvious, start being yourself. Easier said than done.
How does that begin? It's a very good question, to be honest.
Because it has to be embraced in music. It has to be embraced in fashion. Because everybody's copying African American fashion, or now they're moving towards British fashion. There's a loss of self there. Fashion, music, and pretty much in the arts, essentially.
For me, go ahead. Yeah.
Just from observing the UK, right? When the UK started, they came up. I'm talking about music now, right? The newest genre now, they have is drill, right? But they came up with that. It was influenced from Chicago, right? Like the beats, the way that the beats were made and everything, it was influenced from Chicago. But what the UK was, they got that influence, so they were inspired from that, and they kind of made it their own in a way. So what I see from African Australians is that yes, we are influenced by both American and UK, but in the same time, that can't take away the fact that they can also be inspired to do something of their own. So it's like we don't really need to they're taking inspiration. It's actually a powerful thing. You can take something, be inspired by it, and make it your own. Not repeat the same thing that continues to happen. And I think they need to realize that it's not easy to like Alfie said, right? We can just say, be yourself and stuff. But when something is shining very bright, it's hard to see all the other lights and stuff. But the best way is to be authentic. And I can't see any other way of them embracing that culture, being true to who they actually really are. Because it's like you can only be fake. You can be fake for so long, and one moment in your life is gonna start to bother you, and you can be too late. All the opportunities that you have to kind of make better your life. It might go away, but if they learn that in an earlier age to be true to themselves and authentic, because we're all different, we're not all the same. We just have to embrace what we are good at. You know what I mean? And I think they just need to be told that. They need someone to bring that to light to them. Because some of the youth, like what we're talking now, some of the youth mainly, they don't know what we're talking about. They're not really familiar. They're not even aware that they're being influenced. Well, until you have someone there to actually tell them, more people talking about it. Well, we're doing this right now, but in the same time, this needs to be heard, in more places, in a more wider space, And I think once they hear that, once you hear, okay, now they have a chance to change, If they can hear that, process it, and it's up to them. But it starts with authenticity and just being yourself, as it sounds so simple, but that's the only way. That's my point. But take it.
Yeah,
back.
you gotta. It definitely needs to start with the current culture you have here, the small creative music culture you have here, the small group of people who are in their respective hubs and fields need to start leading that and start saying, let's start being who start embracing the culture of what we have here, start doing this. And then you just pass on to the next, the next. And then you end up developing a subculture. Once you develop a subculture, God, that's it. You don't need no outside influences anymore. Now you're the influencer of other people. Yeah.
That's a very great point. But this is my concern. Yeah. My concern is globalization and social media. Now, UK, they were afforded the opportunity to, blacks in the UK, let's try and be a bit more specific for our audience. So the blacks in the UK, they were afforded the time and the opportunity to develop their own sense of identity without the noise of social media, without globalization creeping in. You know what I mean? Like from the 80s to the early 2000s, you know? And it's all, and the same thing happens to our African American brothers and sisters. So it's almost like, I feel like we as African Australians are at a disadvantage, because it's like you're trying to find your own feet and you're trying to find your own sense of self, but you're on social media and this is the dominant culture. You know what I mean? And the world is so interconnected now. You don't have the time, the freedom, and you can't go without being disrupted by, this is what's happening in America. This is the trend now. And it's instant and it's coming on social media. So our youngsters are picking it up. Do you know what I mean? And so my concern is, the question that I always ask myself in my mind is this actually ever going to happen? You know, are African Australians going to really have their own sense of identity? You know, is it going to happen? And if it is going to happen, is it going to happen sooner or later? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It happens. It's there with the social media game. It's going to be a tough. It's going to be a steep. It's going to be a steep one, because even prior to social media, when before social media blew up, we would go to schools, primary school, high school, and because of how dominant African American culture was, everybody would expect you. The expectation was you behaved like them. That was the expectation. They didn't even know anything about Africa. People are like ignorant about African culture and geography and all of that stuff. So the expectation was there. So now you compound that with social media.
Yeah.
So it's going to be by force. But it's by force. Yeah. It has to be a conscious effort.
It has to be a conscious effort, yeah.
It has to be a conscious effort. It has to start with like you mentioned, the film writers who are aware, like yourself, writing films, recruiting Black people, incorporating those themes and of African and Australian themes and making them into something powerful and into a beautiful story, right?
Yeah.
It has to be maybe music producers who encourage these young people to be themselves a bit more, instead of trying to pull something. But there's also the issue. My concern is there's also the issue of marketing. Is it marketable? Maybe what African Americans are selling is much more marketable than what African Australians would be trying to sell. You get me? It's demand, supply and demand issue at the end of the day. So it's a tough one to tackle.
I think
it is a tough one to tackle. It is. Yeah.
It's very tough. It's very tough, especially the social media part. You know, because social media is a big part of everyone's life right now. Like, you know, the first thing people do when they wake up is they look at their phone, you know, they see how much message they got before they do anything, before they even brush their teeth or whatever. You gotta look at your phone.
I'm glad to say I no longer do that. I'm not on social media. Man, it's the most how would you say? You just feel free. That's just the best way. You feel free. Your mind isn't polluted with all that BS, and you just start your day on a good start. You're not looking at this. You're not doing that. You're not trying to find out what this person is doing. It's just you get up, you start your day, and you're tackling things that are important. Yeah. Sorry, Bedz, I cut you off. Continue. You were saying?
No. You brought up a good point because I took some time off too, and I've noticed the difference. Especially when you wake up and your mind is fresh, and the first thing you do is you're taking all that information. Especially just scrolling down, looking at people, looking at their lives and whatever, and it's like it does absolutely nothing to you. Yeah. But this is what the youth are doing. Like their influence. It's hard. It's a hard time. It's a hard time to grow up. I'm not just youth, but this is affecting everybody. And to go back to the question, when you're talking about the culture, the African, Australian culture,
okay.
I think that,
sorry to interrupt you again, Bedz. I feel like we're saying African Australian culture as if it's something that's already in place, that already exists.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something that is still in the early stages and in the works, but it's not really taking off, and we're not really, what would you say, developing it, because we're too caught up in let's be like these folks in the States, or let's be like these folks in the UK. Yeah,
this is something that can only happen. Like time changes all things. Yeah, and especially how. Like when you think of the migration that happened in Australia with all the different cultures that have come to Australia, Africans are kind of the last ones. You know what I mean? So we're still kind of marinating. You know what I mean? Like through time, you're going to see things start to form. People are going to start to integrate. Cultures are going to start to be formed. You know what I mean? Like just like the UK, when you see the West African and the Caribbean culture, it's like merged. Pretty much. It's pretty much merged because they came together, and it's just through time things happen, and it's unavoidable.
Another advantage that the black British Africans who arrived there had is that the Afro-Caribbeans had already set a base for them.
Amen.
So that's an advantage that they had. They had that base set done.
They had that base set, yeah.
Had that base.
So when we arrived here, there was no base. You always need a group of people who set that base first, and it's starting now. That's a good point. It's just time until that develops.
But they set that base because they included aspects of their West Indian cultures into mainstream UK culture. Do you know what I mean? But as we said before, that's not really happening in Oz. Like folks aren't really proudly going, you know what? We're African, and we're going to tell African stories, and we're going to be the continent's ambassadors to the world and to Australia, especially considering that we're a relatively new group. You know what I mean? I don't feel like that's happening. Like, and this brings us back to the question that you asked before, Alfred. What does it actually look like in practical terms, right? So what does it look like to promote aspects of our own African cultures? What does that look like for each individual in their respective profession, in their own fields, or whatever it is that they're doing? Alfred, what do you think that would look like for you as somebody who wants to be a psychologist, an academic, and a researcher?
That's an interesting one, man.
In simple terms, how can you be an ambassador of Africa in your own field and in what you're doing? Because I think that's where it starts. Everyone is having this broad discussion, but I think it all starts with you doing what you need to do in your own world.
Agreed. Well, for me, if you look at in the academic fields in Australia, for instance, there isn't very much. We're still using very generalized therapeutic approaches that are still very much westernized. So you don't consider how people who come from Africa deal with trauma. Let's start addressing let's start looking into research into how they experience trauma and how we can address it in therapy, because you can't use that same method for what you're using with normal Australians. It's a complete experience. So it's that cultural, adding that cultural element of it in research in therapy. Actually making that more of a thing. Encouraging other Africans to get in those fields, because they have this tendency to avoid them. Every African wants to be a nurse.
Not that there's anything wrong with being a nurse.
Nothing wrong with that. Don't get it twisted. Nothing wrong with that. But every single one of these people, they avoid these fields because they're stuck in this scarcity mindset of we need to find a secure job. So we need to find something secure. You get me?
Yeah.
So if we had more people in fields like psychology and therapy and that, you'd have a completely different landscape in academia. Completely. So that's in a nutshell, that's what it would look like for me.
What about in practice? What would that look like in practice? Because there's this South Sudanese counselor, psychologist, and here in Melbourne, he is having clients who are of South Sudanese backgrounds, and he does this really wonderful thing of including aspects of how we deal with mental health issues and trauma into his own practice. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but back home, people had this way of, what would you call it? Community counseling. You know, like if somebody was going through something or needed
sort of like that elderly thing, yeah?
Yeah, that elderly thing, yeah.
Yeah.
So people would sit with you, have discussions with you. It was informal setting, informal format, and it worked. You know, it was very warm, very conversational.
Yeah.
And it's in a stark contrast to how folks here in Oz experience therapy. Do you know what I mean? You're in an office, it's a formal setting. It's sometimes you feel like you're being interrogated with questions, but Dr. Santino, the South Sudanese counselor, has a very different approach. And that's just one example of how he incorporates elements and aspects of African culture and traditions into his practice. You know what I mean? So if we see more of that, that would be great. Yeah.
That's a perfect example. There's another African therapist who advises along different forms of meditation for African people.
Yeah.
Rather than the general form of meditation, for instance. Something as simple as the type of beats that you're listening to when you're meditating. So how Africans, we like percussion, drums, and that awakens in us. Whereas other people, normal meditative music is completely different to that. You get me? Some things as simple as that, incorporating things like that in practical therapy, that stuff can go miles away. It's a frequency type of interesting.
Amen. What about you, Bedz? How do you think you can be an ambassador of Africa with what you're doing? Like in simple, practical ways, because essentially that's where it all begins.
So the way I see it is, you brought up a good point before, right? And what about kind of tackling all the goals and achieving the things you need to achieve in your own personal life, right?
Yeah.
That will kind of set up a path in it. And if everyone kind of did that in a way, that can kind of help the collective. The thing with me, I know how I like to look to the root of things. That's like something, when I hear about something, when I hear about an issue, when I hear about just say, for example, someone that spiraled out of control or something happened to that person, you know, where they were a good kid and they ended up bad or something. I always ask myself, what's the problem? What is the root? There's always a solution, you know, there's always a starting point. And I think that's something we don't really address in our culture, like, especially amongst Africans, you know, because you can see that there's people that are going through a lot. And in most African cultures, we're very hard people in a way. Like, we deal with we deal with a lot. We don't really talk about it. And for us, it's like normal. You know what I mean? Growing up with trauma, there's a lot of people going through trauma, but for them, they don't even know that they have trauma. It's a normal thing for them. So it's like what I like to address the root of things, how this, where it all came from in a way, you know. I'm a very creative person and stuff. I've been doing certain creative projects and stuff. In the future, you're going to see more of it, like music. There's a few more other things that I do that I'm not really.
Amen. Release it, Bedz. Yeah.
But even business things, man. Like I want to inspire our people to really look at themselves and know that they're great, because our people are great. They're going through a lot of things, and that's clouding their judgment. Because when you have a issue and it's an internal thing, it's a mental issue. It's happening subconsciously. Some things they're acting out on things that they aren't even aware of, and it's trauma most of the time. Like when you think of the African youth, but mainly let me say Sudanese, yeah, just say like the war and all that sort of stuff. You know, and we don't really like to talk about that. Well, I don't really like to, but it's something that actually needs to be addressed, because what happens when a person experiences war, you know, all the trauma, the PTSD, you know what I mean? And it's just, if that's in the community, you're going to see people act out. You're going to see people do certain things, you know, people are going to try to, like, this is something that's buried in. And what I would like to do is address the root of the issue. And when you know the root of the problem, that's when you can actually change it. Like for example, if, I say the root of the problem, but with anything, before you can change anything, you need to be able to recognize it. So I like to address the root of things. So I think that's a way of how I can help, just to people understand why they are the way they are and how they came to be, like where it started. You know,
with the Americanization of Black youth and African Australians embracing who they are, I think it's just a maturity thing. It's going to have to be a maturity thing at the end of the day. Just recognizing, this isn't it. This is correct. When it's artistic truth is what we're looking for, right? When you have artistic truth in comedy, in film, in music, and it just comes out. People, you're going to have, you carve out a group of people who like you for who you are, who enjoy your work for what it is, rather than trying to build to masses of in America and that. You get me? When that happens, and like what we're talking about here, how we're gonna be ambassadors is pretty much just saying, okay, it starts from individuals, and then it starts from, and then spreading that out, and then people seeing that, and then youth recognizing that and looking up to these groups that are doing that, and then you can have a culture shift. Then you can develop a proper subculture, essentially. But you're right, you've got to go back to how this stuff works.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Alfred. You hit the nail on the head. That's what it starts with. I kid you not, I was with a friend, because like you guys know, I'm working on a script, yeah? I'm working on a short film. And I have this friend who's more experienced than I am as a screenwriter. And I just told him, if you have time, could you please go over my work and see if there's any improvements that can be made? And he looked at the script that I wrote, and he said, hey, listen, in this particular scene, your character is saying the word, and excuse my French, gobby, yeah? And here, your character is saying the word ganger. And this character, his name is Bogan Deng, right? He's a pseudo who's lived in regional Victoria, and he's picked up on that whole Bogan identity. And I'm trying to write this film, and when it's finished, I want to submit this film to international film festivals. And my friend who's more experienced said, listen, if you want to push this out internationally, then you need to have some universal themes and universal language. Some folks who aren't tapping into Australia and what's happening here don't know what a ganga is. So remove that word. Maybe put thought or ho, whatever it is. And I was like, ganga is one of the funniest words. It's funny. I'm like, ganga, gobby. These are the cats that I grew up around in Western Sydney. The cats that I grew up around use these words, and it's funny. I'm like, listen, but isn't that the point? I know you have way more experience than I do, but isn't the point? Aren't we trying to be authentic, right? And sell this and say, hey, this is how we speak in Australia, rather than amending the language and the things that we do to appeal to an international audience. You know what I mean? So that is the struggle. And what I'm pushing for every creative that I work with, right? What I'm pushing for them to do is like, hey, no, incorporate a little bit of the language that we use in your music or in the films that you're writing. You know what I mean? And I always push to do that as well. I always push to do that. With everything that I do as a creative, I always, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'm an ambassador of Africa, and I'm an ambassador of African Australians, and I try and incorporate that into my work as much as I can. Another example. When I used to do spoken word, so I used to perform at like Afro at bars and a spot called Afro Hub and festivals and things like that. Yeah, and my performances were great, but somebody recommended that I should have some background music. So maybe some soft piano to go with the poetry and the spoken word, maybe some guitars or whatever. And this particular person said, hey, why don't you get that jazz player? Maybe he can play the trumpet softly in the background or play this in the background, like some American jazz flavor in there. You know what I did? I turned around and I said, I'm going to try and find an African guitarist who can play a particular style of music, called Seben or Congolese rumba. Like the guitars that we hear in the background in the Wilo songs, for example. And when I did that, it did two things. Number one, it ensured that I was promoting, African culture. Because when I got up on stage and I performed, and the African guitarist was accompanying my work, right? When I got off stage, people were showing him as much attention as me. Yo, we've never heard somebody play the guitar like that. Mm-hmm. It sounds different. What did you do? Did you pluck it a certain way? Did you tighten the strings this way? Like, no. What I'm playing, what I'm playing is called Congolese rumba. And then people pulling out their phones. Oh, okay, what's this sound? And by doing that, we promoted African culture, and we sparked an interest in the minds of mainstream Australians. And now you might have 30 more people listening to Congolese rumba and who are aware of it. Do you know what I mean? Mm. Yeah, it's just simple, practical things like that. But had I taken the easy route, I would have said, hey, you know what? Saxophones, pianos, and that whole lofty, jazzy sound, it goes really well with spoken word. And that's what I see on YouTube. That's what I see these African Americans are doing. And that's what people are familiar with. So I'm going to do that. And that would have been a loss. And that's exactly what's happening. That's an example of what's happening with a lot of us here, African Australian youth. We're taking the easy route and we're saying, this is what's universal. This is what appeals to the masses, because African Americans have already done this, or this particular group have already done this. So it's not foreign to people. And it's an easy way for us to break into this market or to appeal to these people. You don't want to take that hard and difficult path of saying, you know what, I'm going to take something from my own African experience and try and introduce it to people. Because it's a bit risky,
Right, you know what? And I'll toss this one to Bedz. This is an interesting. You touched on something very like that for someone to do that, you need some balls. And you need to have an understanding of self and appreciation of your own culture. number one, I don't think these people have any education in whom they are, in their own cultures, enough to have that level of confidence to be able to do that. So you don't grow the balls without knowing yourself, knowing where you come from.
Okay.
So
Sorry, Alfred.
Ben and I talk about this all the time behind the scenes, man.
Alfred, I'm sorry, man. I'm going to have to interrupt you there. Earlier on, we all agreed that African Australians were a relatively new group, right? And majority of us aren't born here. Like, majority of us are not born here. So, and a lot of us listen to the music of Awilo, for example, in tapes when we were younger. A lot of us had certain sounds in the background, so we can't really plead ignorance because...
No. Okay. Maybe it's not ignorance. Maybe it's denial of self.
Denial of self. Okay, yeah, that's more accurate.
Because we talk about this all the time, man. It's messed up.
We talk about this a lot actually. But the way I see it is, the problem with like the youth and all that and identity and everything, right? Is, like we said before, they don't know who they are and stuff. And it's not really addressed like when, because I think about my experience when I was young, and it's not something people really talk about unless you go to community things and whatever, but the youth don't really want to go to that, So it's like when they think of their own identity, it's not, well, from what I can see, it's not something that they are proud of, but that's seen in a subconscious way. It's not something they will tell you directly. You know what I mean? Because if you think about what we know about our own cultures, most Africans, they don't look at history. They're not gonna go. They're not like we're educated people because we do our own research and stuff, and some of us have gone out and studied and learned and gotten broader knowledge. Well, most people, from what they know from the broad understanding of what they know about themselves and their cultures, it's not something that they can actually be proud of. When you think of Africa, the continent of Africa, and what they have kind of contributed to, you know what I mean? Like, what do people normally think? We only think of the West. We don't think of like the Mali Empire. You know what I mean? We don't think of ancient Egypt. You know what I mean? Like even the South Africa, like we had great empires in Africa, right? And the continent as a whole. Yeah. But the youth, when they look to themselves or their identity and what's kind of what's portrayed, especially in media, and it's like it's not something I can't really blame the media because it's not us telling our own story. You get what I'm saying? So it's like what they're learning about themselves is that, and this is subconscious, okay? They're learning that they're criminals. But what you see from America and stuff, they're learning that, especially that Black people, Black Africans, Black Australians, African Australians, just Black people as a whole. When you think of, when we're portrayed anywhere, it's kind of, we're always seen as lesser. In a way, anywhere in the world, the darkest skinned people, you can talk about any culture, it does not matter where it is. So Asia, the darkest skinned people in Asia, think they're looked down upon, right? Think of Indonesia, the Philippines. You find people that are very dark with curly hair, but you don't see them in the media. Yeah. Think about the Middle East and all the stuff going on with dark-skinned people that are living in the Middle East, right? And the media that's behind it, it's always they're always what's that word? Seen as lesser in a way, and I can see that in a lot of Africans. They feel subconsciously they feel like they are less in a way, like they feel like they are lesser than other people. Like they don't.
But don't you think that's beginning to change?
It's starting to change
because now I'm beginning to see like a rise in, especially on social media, this Black empowerment and Black love movement. Like, do you think it's changing now? Like some of the youth are beginning to research their own African histories and embrace their culture. Do you think that's happening now? It's changing?
I think it's changing to a degree. Yeah. Surface level. Like to a degree, like it.
Surface level how, Alfred? Elaborate on that.
social media, for example. That's number one. Because if you look at their actions, they still haven't gone that deep, man. Like, yeah, you can say, yeah, we all for black excellence, black empowerment, rah 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 rah. Talk all that, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you still look at their action, they still behave less than, and that could be out for other things. They still when they want to travel, they don't say I'm going back home. They say I'm going to Europe, I'm going to America, I'm going anywhere but Africa. They still have those silly preconceptions of living back home. You get me? So things like that.
But it's what they see, you know. It's what they're basing their opinions on what they've seen on television, just like everybody else. I remember coming to Australia, like the earlier years when I was in Australia, and people would ask me about where I come from. They'll be like, "Oh, do you guys live on trees?" Like absurd. They'll tell you absurd things, man. Like, well, you say, "Oh, it's there." People will say, "Oh, is there shops there? Is there like buildings there?" Like weird stuff, man. But it's like, why would someone even say that? They wouldn't just say that to, or most people, if they're in their right mind, they wouldn't just say that to provoke you. They wouldn't. You know, it's something that they saw. You know, so it's like, so when, like I said before, like all you see is World Vision. You think of Africa, you just see like World Vision, charity, you know, aid, or whatever. So why would you want to go there? Especially like you're African, right? And you were born here. You're African Australian. Why would you want to have anything to do with your culture if all you see is like poverty, World Vision, war? You know, and like we just don't have enough. It's true, we don't have enough about people talking about the right things, you know, about our culture and stuff. It's always like we're very divided in a way. Very divided. Everybody has their interests and their hobbies and whatever, and their religions and everything. And there's not a problem with that because we're all different people. But when it comes to unity, I think it's always an issue. Like it shouldn't be an issue. You know what I mean? Because when you start to look around like the world and stuff, like the darkest skinned people are looked down upon everywhere. And they need to realize that. They need to understand that they need to understand that no one really likes them anyway. Like I know I'm saying that, you know what I mean? But like it's true. Like it's a fact. When you really start to look into what's going on around the world, and like people just and why do people look down upon dark-skinned people around the world? It's because of that same misconception. What's been portrayed, and we need to start telling our own story. I think that's what the issue is. Like we're depending on other people to tell our story, our history, you know, to talk about our cultures. You know, you have some guy in England, like an English guy, you know what I mean, going over to Africa and telling our history. And it's like, what can you expect? Of course, they're gonna get it wrong, of course, because they don't understand the culture. It's like there's certain things we wouldn't understand other people's culture because it's their culture, you know?
Yeah.
So we're gonna make mistakes in our interpretation. And it's like we're expecting all these people, right, to do things for us, but we need to do it for ourselves. Like the older generation and stuff need to start speaking up. And those that know more, it's in their power, it's in their duty, it's in their right for them to speak up more and do what they can, you know? And enlighten the ones that aren't really familiar with this information, you know, because it changes you. Once you start to know who you are, once you start to embrace your culture and embrace your differences, it's no longer a crutch. It's no longer a crutch to you. It's something that, okay, you embrace it, it helps you move on. But whenever you're trying to be someone else or whenever you hate certain aspects of yourself, and especially when it's subconscious, you're not aware that it's there, it will destroy your life. Like in a way, you know, without you noticing. You're going to be like, what's wrong? You know, what's wrong with me? But you're not embracing who you are or your culture. It's a different sort of energy when you embrace it. So you get what I'm saying, right?
Amen. Amen, King. Alfred touched on something that is a bit off topic, but I want to dive into it a bit more. So you said a lot of the people that are embracing Black beauty, empowerment, it's all surface level. and you gave the example of a lot of Black people living away from African Americans, us, you name it, like living away from the continent, right? Not wanting to go back, wanting to go to Europe as opposed to going to their own home country. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think that's going to change over the coming years?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's going to be more visits to Africa, you reckon?
There's definitely, because when people start recognizing, hey, Africa isn't this dump, it's actually a place rich with culture, and you can actually, there's places to see. It's not a dystopia that you were sold. Yeah. So yeah, as soon as Africans say, all they need to do is pay one visit. Hey, to
be honest with you though, we have to be specific. I think, and this is not me trying to put my people down or anything of that nature. I think it depends. It depends where you go.
And which African country?
Yeah, because like, to be fair, right, there are some places that are a bit dangerous.
You're right.
Like if you were to go to Burkina Faso, for instance, right, they had a coup just the other day, and there's massive insecurity. Obviously, your experience would be different, right? If you went to a place like Ghana, for instance, which is relatively peaceful, relatively stable. Do you know what I mean? I think it depends where you go. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Even within, not even just countries, within the cities of that countries that you go to as well.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You just got to be. It's like any place. You just got to be mindful of of what you're doing and where you're going. You can't be like a little naive child who's going into any place. It doesn't matter even if you go to the US, right? You still got to be mindful. But yeah, man, I reckon it's just pay that visit. As soon as that mindset shift happens, then I know it's real. But it's all talk so far. It's all talk.
Yeah.
It is because they're all they do. They still go out and do what? They still even in what's it called? Lost my train of thought. Even in the dating space, they still go out and put the white people on a pedestal as if they're the prize. They still do that. It's a mental thing, bro.
They do that out here or back home as well?
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
So
are you saying that comes, like, does that come out of it's like that intention? Does it come out of a place of just admiring someone else, just admiring them for them, or just kind of like pursuing, like hating on your own in a way, just like liking something that's different?
Yeah, they still have this psychological self-contempt that they're just projecting on the people that look like them, so they avoid them. In other words, so it's it's a deep one, but it's for another day.
Yeah, it's definitely a segue into the topic for our next episode, which is interracial dating. Yeah. It should be interesting.
Segue into that. Right, that's a whole topic in itself.
That's true. But what you were saying, like, even with traveling is it's important to travel. It's important to go and actually see the places that you're reading about or watching videos about. Because people have this knowledge, and it's always preconceived ideas.
Of course, yeah.
Until you actually go to that country, and like when you speak to people that have traveled, even us, I've traveled, and if you've traveled or so, like, people understand, like, they start to get more knowledge. They're very knowledgeable about the world because they've been there, they've experienced it, they've seen the places, and they're like, yeah, it's not what they thought. You may think that. But I went to Brazil, right? And I heard about Brazil.
Oh, you went to Brazil?
I've been to Brazil 2015, right? And I heard that it was a dangerous place.
Where'd you go?
And don't get me wrong, there's parts of Brazil that are dangerous. I'm not saying that it's the safest place in the world, but it's like the way people were talking about, oh, it's dangerous. Well, you gotta, you have to watch yourself wherever you go, and it, like, it is a dangerous. In certain places, it is dangerous, but you have to have a different approach when you go there. You can't really look like you're a person that doesn't know what they're doing. If you're there walking around, looking at everything, like just exploiting. Of course, people do that everywhere too. People do that. That's everywhere. You know, you even go to Europe, the most posh places in Europe, any country, right? You will find the same thing. You know, people trying to rob you and whatever. Like the people, because there's people there that are watching, like this person a foreigner or whatever. You find that everywhere. You know, but all in all, they were very nice people. It's not what I thought. Like people were very friendly there. Like that, it's very multicultural. So it's like, it's not like here in a way, like in Brazil, when people look at you, you can be black, you can be Asian, you can be whatever, and people still see you as a Brazilian. Whereas here, people ask you, where do you come from? Where are you this? Or like, you can't just say I'm Australian. I'm like, I'm Australian. Like, nah, but what's your background? There's none of that in Brazil. So it's like, if I went with the same misconception that this place is only dangerous, I wouldn't have the good experience that I had, you know? So it's like, it's just about having an open mind. Of course, you have to be cautious, but have an open mind. Don't just take things for face value or from just what you heard or what you read about or what you saw in a video. Go to that place if you can and see it for yourself and then make your own interpretation. You know, and that's what Africans need to do. They need to dig deeper into their roots. They need to go on a journey. You know,
shatter that image.
They need to go on a personal journey. It's a personal thing. In the end of the day, you can only tell somebody so much, but we need to encourage that more.
Yeah,
you know, that's how things change.
So essentially, with coming back to finding and developing a strong subculture in Australia within African. We're pretty much talking about how building cultural capital, because that's non-existent right now, right? Because African Americans have unbelievable cultural capital that even Latinos there pull from their culture. Everybody there pulls from their culture. That's how much cultural capital that they have. Now that the Black Brits are starting to develop that too, their own subculture, cultural capital. So it is like
that happens here. Hopefully that happens here in Oz. It might be steep, like we mentioned, all the obstacles like social media and all sorts of things that are holding it back. But until those individual pieces come together, the film writers, the musicians start becoming who they are. We'll come together slowly but surely. Slowly but surely. Yeah.
Any more thoughts, Jay?
I'm just mindful of the time. We've been going over an hour now. So I'll just end with this final note or with this final question. You guys touched on, this idea of embracing your roots and making sure you visit back home. Can you guys seriously picture yourselves living back home? Because this is a question that I've been asking a lot of people, especially people around my age. Is your plan to settle here and be established here, or are you still holding on to that old view, that old thing that our parents have of like, hey, once we get our degrees and we establish ourselves, the goal is to go back home and build? Because for me, I would say I'm a bit conflicted, right? On the one hand, I'm very passionate about my people and development and going back home to assist. But on the other hand, I'm like, hey, I'm sort of settled here. You know what I mean? And everything is sort of coming into place and I'm happy here. And I'm not sure if that's actually going back home to live there is actually something I would want to do personally. So I'm just really interested to know, just your view on that.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with not wanting to go back home, as long as there's some form of contribution that you do there. As long as you pay, because if you go there and maybe even stay there for 2 years, or maybe even 1 year, or just visit frequently, you get me. just to maintain that connection, and you may just keep your base in whatever Western place you maintain, whether it's here or elsewhere. So I think that idea that you have to live back home in order to be a true, pro Black person is not entirely real, because you've absorbed the culture here. You've pretty much it's become your part of your identity. So going back elsewhere would disrupt that. So it's not realistic to expect that of everyone. It's just not.
It's not realistic.
Some people just go back home and they feel an overwhelming sense of returning and just presence, and this is it for me. Just community, and others just don't feel that. If you don't feel that, you don't feel that. You don't feel that. It's
so for you, Alfred. So for you, Alfred, for you to know, right? You can't picture yourself living. I do. That being it.
I'll tell you what. I do plan on living there for about 2 years or so.
Okay.
But I don't know if it will be permanent. It will be like a nice long visit.
Okay, so a nice long visit for 2 years. Yeah. Any business plans or plans to?
Oh yeah, it would definitely have to be on business.
Okay.
It definitely have to be business. Yeah, we'll keep that off there.
What about you, Bedz?
Yeah, it's not easy building a life. So you especially got your life, building a life here in Australia, and then being expected to move all the way back, leaving everything, Not everybody's different. Some people will actually move back, and some people have already moved back, that were here once before, and they've moved back and they've settled there, and they're doing great, But it's for me, I can see myself living there, not at the moment. I have a few things that I need to accomplish still here. I need to finish here and stuff, because Australia is my home. But I know that there is a need to go back and even to visit frequently. I've visited a few times, and I always come back rejuvenated, And it's like with every trip people want to take, you get that experience. You feel rejuvenated, but there's something different about going back home. You know what I mean? There's something very different. Like you feel it. You literally feel it. You don't have to worry about a lot of things that you worry about here. And everybody looks like you. So it's I think that's something people need too. You need
everybody looks like you, but on the other hand, they can also pick you out pick you out in the crowd and say this person is from Australia. Do you know what I mean?
That still happens. That still happens. Yeah, I'm not ruling that out. But it's just there's still something very different about just coming to your home. It's just something different. That's what I felt, because at first I wasn't born in Sudan, right? But it's when I went there.
You were born in Egypt?
Yeah. But I didn't want to go back.
You didn't want to go back?
I didn't want to go. But when I went there, I didn't want to leave. You know what I mean? I know there's a lot of people that have had that same experience because they had preconceived ideas before they went there. You know what I mean? And it's for me to settle there, I can see myself settling there when I get to the point in my life that I need to get to, where I can kind of settle and be able to manage myself there and everything. Because you have to be able to manage yourself. You can't just go there, You can't just go there expecting to have, a proper life, whatever. It's hard. It's hard. Certain things are hard in some aspects, but it's you really can make a life. You can make a good life there if you really have a plan that works. And there's people making businesses there. They're well off, man. I've seen them and they're happy. They're living it's not like the life here, fast paced. You know what I mean? And just constantly working, constantly on the move. There's a bit relaxed, there's a time that people go and eat. You know what I mean? And everybody goes eats, people eat together. There's this culture, other cultural thing that's very important to a lot of people too. Because it's you can get lost corporate world, you know what I mean? And here too, you can get lost as working. And in the end, you're not really taking care of yourself and your health and your mental health. So I can move there, but not now. I see in a few years, but not now. Australia is my home, you know. I've got 2 homes.
Yeah, no.
Likewise, I think it's the same for me. Yeah. This is my base.
Yeah.
And if I'm to do anything, it's just maybe going back home at a later stage, or maybe going to visit for like 2 or 3 years, like you, Alfred. But I can't envision myself just living there, you know? I've become too accustomed to this.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed. No, that's it.
Things can always change, man.
Yeah, never say never.
Never say never.
Never say never. But now, boys, I think we've gone over time. It's time to wrap this up. I appreciate the convo.
Likewise.
We'll hit it up again with our next big topic. So we'll have a good time, all right?
Yep. It's been a pleasure, boys.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. Take care, yeah?